On this episode of Carpe Diem, Zoomer Weddings.
Wanted to have a celebration of love.
We know what we want.
What makes you think I'm going to want a man?
From I don't to I do. Experts Marina Adshade, Darren Hott, and Jane Karstens talk commitment later in life.
Carpe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome to Carpe Diem. On today's episode, we're talking Zoomer weddings. Our expert panel will discuss what does a perfect partner look like to you, where to find them, how to deal with potential conflicts, and if the stars align, what does that look like? Leah found a couple of dancing lovebirds.
Step, triple step, rock step, triple one.
If you want to meet somebody interesting, do something interesting.
Oh, you're just doing an extra step, that's all.
I thought I went left,
You're being creative. Oh yeah, you just took an extra step before you went left, right. We have couples come in, sometimes they come in for a first date. Sometimes a gentleman will surprise his lady with a lesson. Sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes singles come in separately and they meet, just like Rob and Elka.
I started joining like a year before him for fun and dancing and socializing, and then he wandered into the studio, I think 6 months after, a year after. He wandered along. Suddenly he was there.
So you're like the expert dancer and you had to show him the moves.
I don't know if you want to say expert, but it was amazing. Yeah, it was nice kind of having a newbie. I was dancing with a newbie.
I actually proposed to her on the dance floor here too.
You did?
During a festival with a
That
bunch
was scary.
of people.
That was so scary.
And she had no idea.
No.
It looks tough.
No.
No, you got it.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
I think people need to have fun, go out there, and I think that's the most attractive thing out there is somebody who's confident and knows how to live life. I was independent, wild, and free. What about that?
And now?
I am independent, wild, and free, and happy.
That was very romantic. And Elke said she's married, now she's happy. Marina, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so I'm an economist, not exactly the most romantic profession, but economists have actually been trying to figure out what makes people happy for about the last 50 years. And so we collect data on surveys that ask them specifically this question. So there's been a lot of debate. Are single people happier than married people? Are married people happier than single people? It's a really great topic for conversation, but it turns out the data is definitely on the side of the married couples. And that's particularly true for people who are in the middle of their lives.
And that's why your office is so busy, Jane.
Right. Because if you're single, you're always looking. It's inherent. That's where we're always looking. It's just, you just don't know where to find it.
And so how do you facilitate that for people? What do you...
Yeah, for me, it's to connect people. And that's what my job is, to facilitate a connection and introduce two people who are like-minded.
Yeah. Darren, marriage makes you happy. What do you say?
I think there's more to it than happiness. I hope that people are thinking more about just being happy. I think about the problems that can come up because I'm at the other end of it. I'm there when families come apart, right? So I'm thinking of blending families. I'm thinking their finances and those kind of important conversations. But I hope that people get married for more than just happiness. That there's something there about being better as people. I think there's a lot to it. It can be very rich.
Well, that's a very good point. And in fact, we wanted to find out how you felt about marrying later in life.
You know, I'm going to tell you that later weddings are a good thing for people.
I've known lots of people who have, they just keep marrying the same kind of person and it never works.
Well, we both have lots of experience in relationships and we know what not to look for.
So your values line up?
Yes. They do. Very much so. It's amazing.
You know what you don't want and you have your values are established and you want that in the other person. You know what you want.
By the time you come to your second one, if you're our age, now you're coming close to retirement, it's different. You don't have kids you're having to worry about so much, even if they're growing up, right?
It's just a number. Somebody's ready, they're ready.
I think that at 55 or 60, you know what you can deal with, you know what's important, and you don't sweat the little things. Right. So perhaps, they have more experience under their belt, so they make a better decision.
And actually, there's a good number of people that come together, when they were young, they were in love and then went their separate ways, and then get back together and they realize, I never did stop loving you.
Jane, I heard that as we get older, we know what we want and we know what we don't want.
Right. It's like taking the already complicated and making it more complicated, right? That's really what it is. And I think that as we get older, we tend to think we know what we want a bit more. And you need to come up with a strategy and a plan if that's the case.
And do you find people come in and have a list? I don't want this, I want that. Is that real?
Some do, some don't. Some have a very long list, which is almost impossible.
And of course, Marina, our idea of marriage has changed drastically too.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you listen to the people on the street is that, when you're younger and you have, plans to have children together, there's ideas around somebody might be staying home, take care of those children, what other person might be a provider. Those things kind of change later in your life. And so what you're looking for in a relationship, I would think it would be very different.
I think for people that come out of a relationship previously, particularly the couples that I see that are getting separated and divorced, they leave that with a certain amount of, we'll call it baggage. They go into their next relationship thinking, how can I avoid some of the difficulty I had last time? How do we do our conflict better? How do we manage our finances together better? How do we have the right conversation so that we understand each other and our expectations moving forward? So a lot to learn from. Are there kids in the mix?
Yeah.
Are we blending families, and how do we relate to the kids and discipline? And
big one.
Wow, massive, yeah.
Big one. Kids are a big one.
Yeah, well, we can see lots of things of how relationships have changing, and when we come back, what does being married as a Zoomer look like?
Still ahead on Carpe Diem.
Decided to meet for dinner. Got there around 6 o'clock and we closed out the restaurant. We just kept talking and talking, and that's what made me think that there's something here.
Carpe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
In this segment, we're talking about Zoomers getting married. Dean went to visit newlyweds Bert and Christina.
This is a good one.
Reports show that divorce rates for those of 50 years age and older are on the rise. However, there is a brighter side to the statistic. More baby boomers, or Zoomers, are now saying I do for the second time.
So the wedding was in here. We had 18 people, mostly family and a few really close friends. So I walked down here. Bert was waiting there with his kids.
We met through a matchmaker. We decided to meet for dinner. Got there around 6 o'clock and we closed out the restaurant. We just kept talking and talking, and that's what made me think that there's something here, because I could tell her everything about me.
How long between the last marriage was there and this marriage?
32 years, something like that. Not dating at all.
Not dating at
No,
all. Why didn't you date during that time?
Well, I was scared. I had been single for so long. I just saw my friends dating, and it created so many problems for their children. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that to my kids, right? Then I decided that I would use Jane. And they're so comfortable.
What can you tell me about the wedding this time around?
We made this one really small. We got married here at our house, and because both of us went through the big weddings before, and we just didn't want that. We wanted to have a celebration of love with our family and friends.
You guys are so happy together.
Yeah. Well, at this age, if you're not happy, you don't have to stay together. We don't have kids together. We're just together for each other.
Reporting on love, Dean Atwell, back to the studio.
Jane, you played Cupid. Did they come to you looking for marriage?
They both were pretty clear on what they were looking for. Right down to even I met Christina's kids, her sons. She wanted me to meet the whole family because it was a big thing for them to actually, bring someone new into their family, and it was pretty exciting to be a part of that.
Yeah. Well, she said she hadn't dated for 32 years.
Yeah.
So what do you think about a woman that doesn't date for a long time and then suddenly wakes up one day and says, you know what, I need to fix that. I want to get married.
It sounds like something I might do one day.
You know who to call.
I do. I absolutely do know who to call. You know, I can really relate to that. And I do think, you know, often too, when you see couples like that, or you go to party, or you see your friends who are really happily in relationships, it does make you think, oh, wow, there's actually these possibilities out there, and that maybe I could do this, and maybe this is something that would make me happy.
There's lots of people in all kinds of stages of life, whether young or middle age, older, that can be in a place where they're looking for that kind of relationship. You've seen that 1,000 times, so you know all about that.
Yeah. Well, in fact, we went and asked you, what did your second wedding look like?
What we did was a backyard wedding, but we brought family and everything in, and we did it properly as an actual wedding, and then had a reception and everything, which we'd missed out on the first time.
Well, we actually, I can't
Did it
say
twice.
that.
Yes,
oh,
you
we
can.
can't say that to me. We did it twice. We actually had a small, just private ceremony in Seattle, and then a month later we went back to North Carolina and had a very big 75-person wedding.
Well, they're generally in the backyard, you know, more relaxed, as you say, casual.
For most people that I know that have been married the second time, I think it's probably because this is really what they want and they don't need all that fancy expense.
Most said they wanted an intimate and casual day. Darren?
I think a lot of times the first wedding's that big one. And the next one, I think more often I'm seeing that they're a little more intimate affairs, and I think that's...
It's the commitment, I think, right? In front of your friends and your family, and I think that's the important part.
Yeah.
Would you have a big wedding?
No, I know. I've actually, it's funny because I've not been planning on getting married, but I do have the wedding planned. It's funny. I've had it planned. I know exactly who's going to cater and everything. That is kind of funny.
You just need the group.
I have no idea what I want in a man, but the wedding is sorted out.
Well, when you're marriage minded, you're always thinking about it. It never goes away.
And I think that's
clearly. Yeah.
It's way easier to plan a wedding than it is to know what a marriage should be like too. That's the complicated part, right?
So
we can plan a wedding.
I have a question for you. We can plan the wedding, but there's so many other styles of union between Zoomers. What does that look like?
Yeah, it varies. It just depends on each individual person. But I think it's that declaration of love in front of their friends. That's really important. Some have even actually done fake vows because they couldn't remarry because it might impact them financially.
I think that that's what's really nice about where we are right now is that you can actually build your own relationship and have it look the way that you want it to. Of course, that makes it a little bit more complicated, but also like more appealing, right?
Right.
That's a very good point. And when we come back, conversations that need to take place before saying I do.
Still ahead on Carpe Diem.
Talk about what you have, what you'd love to see. Talk about the things that make you anxious. Talk about your goals. But do it regularly.
Carpe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome back. Which topics are important to discuss before we walk down the aisle? Darren?
There's something to stand up for me. The blending of families, and if there's children involved, what does that look like in terms of connecting with kids? And for me, I sometimes help couples do cohab agreements and marriage agreements going into it, because a lot of things legally to think about when it comes to that. And also your past conflict. What was it like in the past? How have you grown to this point, and what does that mean for your new relationship?
What are the complications of bringing families together?
Well, if it's in regards of merging families together, I think that is one of the things that a lot of Zoomers experience. In the case of Bert and Tina, they were both empty nesters. And so if they were to create a union together, then living together, there was really not a lot of problems. But for some families, it's not the case. So a lot of the Zoomers have kids that are still staying at home in their 30s and 40s and can cause a bit of a problem.
So you have to have a conversation in a family unit to make sure everybody's happy.
Right.
Marina, what do you think?
We talk about what happens before the wedding, but I think it's actually really good for people to set up a comfortable dialogue with their partner that continues throughout the marriage, because of course circumstances change, and I think it's good for people to constantly have conversations, you know, about how they're handling their relationship, how they're handling the relationships with other people, things that have to do with their finances.
Well, in fact, to get some advice, I had a chat with financial advisor Jim Doyle and asked for his checklist. Jim, as a financial planner, a Zoomer couple walks into your office. What is the first thing that happens in there?
It's interesting how, you know, we all have our own history, our own experiences, but when you're getting married to somebody, you're not just marrying the person, you're marrying their beliefs, their perspectives, their ambitions, their fears, and you're marrying their finances.
What checklist would you give a couple right now thinking about getting married?
I'd say be open. Talk about what assets you have. Talk about the income streams that you have. Talk about your goals.
And when you say goals, specifically like what we're going to be doing in 5 years, or?
Well, I think a beautiful place to start that conversation is, you know, could you describe to me how you'd like to spend your time in a typical day of retirement? And it's interesting how a lot of couples really are not on the same page. What do you mean you want to spend all your time with the kids? I thought I was going to spend it all up at the cabin fishing.
So for anybody watching, what advice do you have for them?
Sit down with a financial planner, and as a couple, talk about what you have, what you'd love to see, talk about the things that make you anxious, talk about your goals, but do it regularly.
Do you have a personal story to add to your experiences?
You know, when we bought our last home together as a couple, we decided that we wanted to pay off our mortgage over the next 7 years. And that meant no exotic trips or big expenditures or anything like that. Now that we're mortgage free, you know, we're in a more comfortable position. But that took a lot of giving up for a while.
And it had to be made, it was a mutual decision, that's the point.
We talked about it, we agreed together that that's what we would do.
Because now you both take some very nice trips, often. So it worked out.
We've had a few nice trips, absolutely.
Jim's advice is relevant for all couples. Marina?
You know, it seems like the secret to all of this is to be willing to talk to each other.
Yeah.
Right? I think that that's what everything seems to come down to is open and honest dialogue.
I love that question. What does a typical day of retirement look like for you? That's brilliant. I mean, that puts a really vivid picture on it so that someone can say, I want to be traveling a lot. I want to golf. I want to do whatever it is. I want to be with my grandkids. All that stuff is so important.
I've had a couple where they wanted to travel, and then it came down to, well, how much for each trip? And do you want to fly first class or economy? And it came down to some actual dollars and cents at the end of it, which make or break the relationship.
You know, this idea of having this conversation throughout the relationship, I 100% agree. And it has to start at the beginning part. You know, the other couple we just saw talked about, you know, that first conversation, and they closed the restaurant, right? They started with that kind of conversation, and that puts them in good stead for the rest of the relationship, if that's the pattern.
Yeah.
And it sounds like hard work, but the upside is you get to have the kind of relationship you want.
Yeah.
And keep it.
And keep
well,
it.
It's hard to work when it put the work in up front, right? Because if it's going sideways, that's hard work. I mean, that's my clients, that's what I see.
Yeah.
That's a great point. When we come back, we'll hear our panel's final thoughts.
Still ahead on Carpe Diem.
A short while ago, I did meet someone very much that I cared very, very deeply for and felt things that I'd never felt before. So it is possible.
Carpe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
It's now time to go around the table for our panel's final thoughts. Jane, let's start with you.
Well, I think we've talked today about being open and communicative, and I think that's the best place to be, of course. But sometimes I think we can get into too much information, which can raise some red flags, which is a good thing. So it's kind of knowing how far you can go in the conversations will make or break a relationship. But I think at the end of the day, everybody's looking for love, and I think they all want to make it work. And so I think if you can combine all these efforts in one thing, you will find it. You will find it.
And to that point, we asked you, is it ever too late to find love?
Just a short while ago, I did meet someone very much that I cared very, very deeply for and felt things that I'd never felt before. So it is possible. Really and truly, Honestly, I think it was almost stronger than what I had with the man that I was married for many, many years.
In fact, my husband said to me, if something happens to me, I want you to go and find yourself a man. And I said, well, what makes you think I'm going to want a man?
You know, people look at us as old fogies, but I think we've got a lot of zippity-doo left in us, and we just need to get out there and do it.
That's the spirit, Darren?
Zippity-doo.
Zippity-doo.
I love it.
Yeah, it's terrific. Here's two things that stand up for me,
Yeah.
for people that are going to get back into relationships or relationships for the first time. I would get some legal advice and think about getting a marriage agreement, cohabitation agreement. And I know there's a lot of angst around that. I don't want it, it's like you're planning for a divorce at the end of the day. But think about this. I had some clients, I've had clients that have had injuries and brain injuries that have changed their personalities. So maybe someone can change, and that you don't want that to happen. The second thing is this: learn from what's happened in the past. If you've been in a relationship that's been difficult, learn from that, grow from it, and be better. Have the right conversations, as we've been
Takes
talking
two
about.
to tango, right?
Takes two to tango.
Marina?
Well, first of all, I think that Jane has me fully convinced I should be out looking for love. You know, I always say to my students, you're not going to have your parents' marriage. And you know, I think that the message here is you are probably not going to have the marriage that you thought you were going to have when you were younger, but I think you're actually going to have something better. People, when they get older, when they get to be my age, you're at a stage of your life where you can actually choose the way that you want things to be. And also, we always have an option of staying single.
I have so enjoyed this panel. Thank you so much, Jane and Darren and Marina. It's been amazing. And that's the show. And remember, as our Carpe president, Moses Neimer, always says, the best way to keep going is to keep going. So, Carpe diem and seize your day.